Hi, everyone. This is Debbie, and welcome back to the Transition Bridge podcast. This is the podcast where we come together each and every week to discover more about the purpose and the power in our life's transitions. And speaking of a life transition, as your transition life coach as well, if you find yourself in the middle of a season that you don't quite understand, that you don't know how to move forward from, there's a lot of questions going on in your heart. I want to reach out to you and welcome you to schedule a free call with me. All of my contact information is in the show notes below. Let's connect. I want to hear your story and I want to help you. Now, with our episode today, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts when you hear this phrase, the unknown bucket list? Well, my guest today, Jay Lumen, is here to share more on this. You hear of people who flip houses, flip tables. Well, my guest today literally helps people flip their lives in real time. So if you feel like you're doing life right now, but it just doesn't feel quite right. Or maybe you're that person who keeps postponing their life until timing, money, or circumstances just line up perfectly, but you still feel stuck in the waiting. Well, this episode is for you. Jay Lumen is a speaker and a thought leader who has created the unknown bucket list. It's a rational philosophy that teaches people how to reinterpret their lives so that they can begin to recognize their overlooked capability and include what they want in their decisions and to live life without regret, without abandoning your responsibilities or waiting for the right time. She speaks to responsible, capable people who've done everything right except include themselves and offers clear and practical ways to shift what feels possible moving forward. Well, Jay, welcome to the Transition Bridge podcast. I'm really excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Debbie. I don't think I've been introduced quite like that. I'm very touched by that. Thank you.
Well, it's easy. When I read your story, I just thought, oh, like this is great. I love your whole philosophy behind the unknown bucket list. We always hear of the bucket list, but the unknown. So I can't wait till we take a deep dive into that. And I want to hear how you flip people's lives. Some of us just need a big flip every now and then to wake up and to get on to what our calling is in life. But I know before we get there, you have a personal story that you want to share with us, a very life-threatening situation that happened to you years ago that actually became the catalyst of what you're doing today. So you want to just briefly touch on that with us?
Sure, thank you. And it's the reason behind the unknown bucket list, basically. And everybody goes through something in life. If you're on this earth long enough, you will go through something.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the principles of the unknown bucket list is to stop comparing ourselves to others. So as I continue to share my story, I don't want anyone to hear it and think, oh, well, I haven't been through anything as bad as her, because it's not about comparison. If you've been through something, it doesn't matter what it was. If it was bad for you, if it was a struggle for you, then you deserve to give yourself credit for getting through that.
Right.
And for me, I was in a relationship that had run its course, trapped in a toxic job environment, and really just needed to change my life. So I figured a way out through that. And 2 months later, unexpectedly, my ex, we'd been involved, we had not been in a violent relationship. So I had no reason to fear him, but he did drive over 1,000 miles. And the night ended with his arrest for attempted murder of me.
Oh gosh. I can't imagine the shock of it all. Like you said, you didn't have a violent relationship. There was no reason to fear him. So, oh my
No,
gosh.
no, and you're right with the word shock. It was definitely a shock. What had happened though was I had gotten out of the relationship, but then I convinced myself of all the reasons I needed to keep the job that I also hated
Mm-hmm.
because of all of my responsibilities. And had he succeeded that night, I would not have uh, died happy. Like I was still living a miserable life. And it was kind of like a kick in the pants of you got yourself out of half of the situation and then you just kind of quit. And you only have one life to live. And you never know when it's going to end. So go live your life.
Mm. That is so powerful because sometimes it takes events like that for us to realize how precious life is. Like you said, like I could have died very unhappy, unfulfilled, and left a lot on the table, um, unexpectedly leaving this earth. And so, when I think of the trauma, that whole moment, a lot of us, trauma does happen in our life, like you said earlier. And sometimes that trauma causes people to just step back and they either just give up on life or they take years before they can even get back to that baseline of safety. And it seems to me that you've bridged that gap of just being more than just being glad to be alive, but you decided that you're going to actually make changes. You're going to actually start choosing yourself. So, how did you get to that point?
Well, it's basically exactly what you just said. So I decided that night that I was no longer going to let life control me. And not that we really have control over anything. We do
Right.
like to think that we do.
That's true.
But we do have control over our thoughts and our actions. And what had kept me exactly where I was the responsibility, the consequences of if I were to just abandon my job or break the lease. There were all these negative consequences that happened as a result of my ex coming back that evening. And I could not stay another night in my rental. So I did have to break the lease. I had to stay at the job a little bit longer than what I expected because now I needed the flexibility to go to court. And so it took about 13 months from the time I ended the relationship with him to start to change my life until I could actually start living my life and things that I thought I was going to avoid by keeping the job and just, continuing to pay the bills, etc.
Mhm.
And that I could start living my life when the lease was up. All the problems I was trying to avoid became my problems anyway. I had to break the lease. And it teaches you that even when things are hard, you can still base your decision in what you want and then negotiate with yourself from there about how to achieve what it is that you want.
So let me ask you this question based on that. So many people say, I'll focus on that when this happens. They look for the perfect time, the perfect circumstances. So, how does your philosophy and all that you've created help people break out of that perpetual waiting room before they step into the next season?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is we've been talking about responsibility a lot, or I have. um, and we all know there are negative consequences if you don't pay your bills.
Hmm.
But if you are working towards a specific goal, if there is something that you want to achieve, maybe there's a different way around it. Or maybe you can put a timeline on it. If you begin with what you want at the root of your decision, there's a way to make it happen, even if it's just in tiny little micro moments.
Hmm.
And sometimes we don't know what we want, but we know what we don't want.
That's
And you
true.
can use that as a way to kind of continue through. So one of the ways I explain it is if you are having a conversation about what to have for dinner with your partner, your spouse, your friend, your colleague, whatever, you have dinner plans. And for most of us, when we're asked, what do you want for dinner? We say, oh, it doesn't really matter. I'm good with whatever. We don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. We don't want to seem like we're being selfish. There's all kinds of reasons that we just kind of deflect and not add in what it is that we want. But let's say we're in the mood for Italian. So now we know what we want. We also don't want to come across selfish. We also don't want to hurt the other person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So we could say, well, I'm in the mood for XYZ, but I don't want. And then you start eliminating things that you don't want, and you can kind of put it over into the other person's boat because that's the art of compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you might want Italian, you might want the other person to be happy more so than you want Italian. But you've at least considered yourself in the decision. And now you're weighing the options based on kind of what you want. And so it's not always about choosing exactly what you want, but at least considering what it is in your decision and then going from there.
Also sharing, yeah, what you don't want, which is a
Mm-hmm.
nice balance of this is what I would like, this is what I'm open to, but this is what I would prefer not. And I do think that's hard for people because we all tend to don't have confidence in our own choices, or want the other person to be, oh, I'll go wherever you want to go. And then we wind up going where we don't really want to go. So I like that. That's a
Well,
great way to present that. I
and
like
it all
that.
ties into living without regret. So it's
Mm,
just these tiny little moments,
yes.
and like what you just said, if we don't say something, even if it's just eliminating what we don't want, then we are going to end up going someplace that we don't want to go. And that's kind of a regret.
Mm-hmm. And I like your initial concept. We may not know what we like in the bigger scope of life now, not just going to the restaurant, but in the bigger scope of life, we may not know what we want, but we certainly know what we don't want. And if can begin to just write that down, that in itself can illuminate possibilities of things that we could consider. So instead of just keeping it all up in our heads, we don't know what we really want. Let's just at least acknowledge what we don't like about our life, and maybe from there begin to discover what it is that we want. So with that thought in mind, you help people discover capability. So I kind of have a twofold question here. What was it that you discovered about yourself when you went through that life-threatening situation with your ex-husband and you had to look back? Were there capabilities in your life that maybe you overlooked and discovered at that time? And then how do you help people do the same?
It's not so much that when I was with my ex that I was overlooking my own capabilities, not consciously at the time anyway, but something that I have become more consciously aware of in
Mm-hmm.
since then
Mm-hmm.
is we tend to minimize our accomplishments and our achievements because they don't appear big enough to count. And what I mean by that is something that I used to do was sing the national anthem at spring training baseball games.
Really?
So, and in sharing that, I would say, well, yeah, I've sung for Major League Baseball teams. And people would say, oh, that's fantastic. That's amazing. And I would say, but it was just spring training.
Ah, yeah.
And because it wasn't big enough to count, it wasn't the big, you know, televised 10,000s of people there in the stadium. It was a spring training game. Now, when I look at it, when I would correct myself on that, was everybody on the roster, the coaches, the players, everybody, were they the same people that would have been in that big televised stadium, televised game in the stadium with all these people watching? Were they the same people? Yes,
Yeah.
they were. So I needed to give myself credit for doing something that, even though it didn't look as big as maybe I imagined it should have to count, it's that type of flipping the switch on somebody's capabilities. So, for example, how I would do it, what is something that you have learned to do in life that you didn't know prior? It's literally a skill that you had to learn.
Oh, you're asking me.
I am asking you.
Okay, may I have that question again? What skill in my life that I had to learn, a new skill?
Yes.
Well, probably well, two things. I became an author. I was not a writer per se. So writing my first book, which is back here, The Family Letter, that was a skill I had to learn, and then becoming a podcast host.
Okay. Did you know how to do either of those things before you attempted it?
No, I did not.
So you had to learn all of these things, and there were
Hmm.
probably all kinds of different facets, all kinds of different pieces of the puzzle. You probably had to be organized. You probably had to be communicative. There are all of these tiny little things that are components of not only publishing your book and becoming, I believe it's an international bestseller.
It is. Yes, it is. Thank
There's
you.
that. And also your podcast. There's all these little components that you, I'm not saying you do, but you could potentially compare yourself to others with your podcast audience size, or especially in the beginning when it's just growing, or when you first published your book before it became an international bestseller. There's all of these things that we can look at, and we say, oh, well, it doesn't count, it's not big enough, nothing like that. So you can look at your all the components within both of those skills, and then you can also leverage those so that when you want to do something new, you can look back and say, well, I did that and I didn't know how to do it when I first started, and look what I created. So I'm going to leverage confidence from that to go forward and do something bigger.
Well, that is a great example because I think be accomplishing writing a book was huge. And I think based on that, then when it came time for potentially thinking about doing a podcast, I was able to look back and look at something that I thought was a scary thing, or does it have any worth or value, and realize, oh my gosh, yeah, this book has become an international bestseller. It's doing something. And it does help you kind of cross that bridge to try something new and different. It's so true. And it is good to look back over your capabilities and not minimize them, but, just realize, hey, maybe that's the stepping stone to go to the next thing.
It is. A lot of times I use the example of learning to drive, because most of us know how to drive a car. And we
Hmm.
nobody hopped in the front seat and the driver's seat and started driving 80 miles an hour down the interstate.
No,
But
let's
it's
hope
it's
not.
proof. And we all have things like that. It's, driving a car is easy, but we all have our own unique little skills that we've learned that maybe we're not giving ourselves credit for what we've actually accomplished. And it's just shining the light on that for people in their own unique
Mhm.
journeys.
That's so true. And so, okay, so we've talked about, looking at our capabilities. How do you help people deal with the guilt of prioritizing themselves? A lot of people, most people prefer to think of others than themselves, or the whole concept and the truth of self-care is becoming more and more prevalent in the years, that how critical that is. But it also takes a mindset of you're not being selfish if you consider yourself. So how is it that you help people with that sense of guilt when they start prioritizing their own desires?
It is a challenge and it does
Hmm.
take a lot of practice. However, it can absolutely be done. Being selfish is different from being self-aware. And I'm going to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier about basing your decisions in what you want. When you decide what it is, what outcome you ultimately want in a situation or a decision that you're, you know, activity that you're trying to choose, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
When you decide what it is that you want, what outcome you want, then you begin that negotiation with yourself from there. And you decide whether you're going to weigh the other people, whether you want their happiness to weigh more than what it is that you want. And so you might choose what it is that they want and you might choose to make them happy. But by considering what you've wanted, you're again creating the decision of least regret. So you're always, and most of us don't even give ourselves consideration. Like
We
we just
don't.
exclude ourselves
Hmm.
completely. And that's the difference is that I'm not saying you'll always choose yourself and you'll always prioritize yourself. That's not the case at all, because that would be being selfish. But at least consider yourself when you're making the decision.
And this comes with practice. So, what I hear you saying is whenever different circumstances or situations come up, practice choosing yourself.
It is, you at least think about what you want, at least in the beginning. You
Hmm.
you stop, you pause, because most of us by default and you know autopilot do consider others. We
Hmm.
prioritize what they want and what they need before we consider ourselves. And that's because we're being kind, we're being nice, we care about these people, we want them to be happy, but we also deserve to be happy. And so by including yourself in the thought process, then you're not self-erasing, because when you make decisions that do not even consider what you want.
I think too, what I'm just imagining certain people listening right now, and even myself. There's sometimes there's things that it doesn't matter to me either way, so I'll defer to the other person. But then there will be times where maybe I do have an opinion or would prefer something different. And so I kind of see a balance there in life of being able to, sure, be kind and let someone else choose, but then there'll be times where you definitely feel something inside, like where you maybe have some other options or choices that it's you're giving us permission to express them. By expressing them, we're not saying that we're selfish. And I believe it actually takes the weight off the other person because if you sometimes I'll say, oh, well, whatever you want is good. And then that person feels the responsibility of, oh my gosh, I hope I picked the right place. So let's like share it together. So I know I do like your example in the beginning about the restaurant. Well, I like Italian. I like this, but I would prefer this is probably what I wouldn't want to do. But there's so many options. So yeah, I really, really like that. So let's talk about the weight of regret, which I think too, especially like, because I work with people in the transitions of life, the different season, especially when we get to 60 and beyond, as I call it, those seasoned years of life, we could have a lot of regret on things that, maybe the fear kept us from stepping into, or, the regret of not taking the risks to try something new. So, how do you help people deal with regret and move on?
One thing is, it really is never too late.
I
If you're
love that.
still alive, it's
Hmm.
not too late.
I agree.
It's only too late when the lights go out.
That's true.
And the decisions that, the decisions that you've made in the past got you to the point where you're at. And for most of us, those decisions, at the time that we made them, we believed we were making the right decision. Nobody sets out at the beginning of their life and writes down their lifelong goals and says, I'm going to build a life that I'm going to regret. That's
That's
not
true.
that's not what we think. When we begin our life in the world as an adult, we believe we are making decisions and taking the steps going to the life that we imagine. And then when we get there and we look around and we're like, this isn't quite what I imagined. And it all has to do with life's responsibilities. Life comes at us, we deal with it, we move on, we keep going. It's all in the name of being the good, responsible adult and
Hmm.
caring for everybody else. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you include yourself in all of those decisions and all of those moves. So if you make a decision and you're going along and all of a sudden you're just like, oh yeah, no, I don't think this is the path that I want to go down.
Hmm.
Give yourself permission to pause. Now we're like, okay, I thought this is what I wanted, but it's not. So let me try something different. And no matter how old you are in life, you can still, even if it's just what do you want for lunch? What do you want for dinner? It's just, I talk about supersizing your life in mini moments. And those are the mini moments that you can supersize your life with.
Well, start with something simple like that, the mini moments.
Exactly. And it's not, we never know when our time on earth is going to end. Age really doesn't have anything to do with it. Obviously, the older you get, it's probably coming a little sooner than we expected, but unfortunately, life can end, you know, with in infancy because it happens.
Yes,
So
unfortunately. Hmm.
it's not really an age consideration. It's I have time. I'm going to choose the decisions that I'm going to regret the least with whatever time I have left.
Isn't it better to choose to take a risk and do something and fail than rather to never try at all?
Well, I like to think of it as you try something and you may get an outcome that was unexpected.
Hmm.
Not failing. It's the outcome was not expected. So you can either try again or you can pivot and you can try something else.
The idea is to just keep trying. And I
It
think from
is.
we learn from anything that doesn't work, we just look at it, reflect. I love John Maxwell. The power of reflection. Just reflecting on what it is that we did, what didn't work. Okay, what could work better? Or is it time to do a complete pivot and try something different, but not to get so discouraged that we give up, or not to get so discouraged that we stop creating, becoming curious about what is possible in our lives.
Mhm.
And so when I think about capabilities, and I do think, we're all there's a lot of gifts and talents within all of us, and I there's people listening right now that have really stepped out on a limb, and you really tried something that was out of the box. It was make a dream of yours and you wanted to try, but your expectations were not met. It didn't quite happen. And um, I have this thing called CAP, put your cap back on, which is your capabilities, your abilities, and your potential. And sometimes when life doesn't deliver what it is we were looking for, we take that cap off and we just sit it down and we stop. And I just really, how do you speak to people who have given up on their capabilities, have just lost the vision for their potential and feel stuck? Like what is like the next small step? Or what is your advice? Like what does your program help them with to come out of that pit, for lack of a better word?
Well, it is shining the light on what they've done. And it does tie back into what we were discussing earlier about when something doesn't look exactly the way we think it should look. And a
Hmm.
lot of that has to do with comparison to others.
Oh, that's true.
We, there are a ton of famous actors. I'm going to use acting because it's an easy it's an easy target for me. uh, there are plenty of famous actors. And you know how many other actors there are in the world? There are tons and tons and tons of background actors. And we don't know their names and we may not know their faces, but that is how they earn their living, is by acting. And did they achieve the success? Did they become famous? Are they starring in the blockbuster movies? Probably not. And they may feel like they didn't quite achieve their dream. And yes, that is accurate. However, give yourself credit, because how you are living, how you're earning your living is by being an actor. You're not famous, but you're achieving the goal that you set out to do. You wanted to be an actor. You are an actor. And it's it's really hard to remove comparison and from others, and it's, well, but it doesn't look like this, and it's, I'm not this and I'm not that. Not everybody can be this and that. But did you achieve your goal? Yes, you did. And it's that flipping of the switch of somebody's thinking, that just planting the little seed. And then with practice, all of this takes practice, because it's not natural to think this way. We live in a world where, especially with social media, comparison is all around us. It's hard
Yes.
not to compare ourselves. I still do it. I see people that I'm like, my friends, they will have traveled someplace, and I'm like, oh man, I really want to go there. And then I check myself, because I've traveled and I've been to some places. And so it's not that my life is mine. I can share it with whoever I want, but I don't need to compare it with anyone.
Hmm.
It's mine.
Comparison, what do they call it? The thief of joy. Because if we get caught up in that comparison trap, we'll always see ourselves small. We'll never
Mhm.
really see ourselves in our capabilities and what we're accomplishing, because we're shining the light really on someone else and their accomplishments. So then we see ourselves small. And I liken it to, you're walking in someone else's shadow. You're trying to walk in their light, and it's not where you're supposed to be walking. You're in a certain lane for a certain reason, for a certain time in your life. And we need to grab all we can from that moment and find the satisfaction of knowing that we are doing right now what it is that we're supposed to do. And I really feel like when you're faithful in the little, you get trusted with more, because we have to like build and grow in that season, whatever it is that you're doing, so you can do the next thing and bring strength and ability with you.
Going with that, um, so I was talking about the mini moments,
Yes.
and along those same lines, just in different words, is when you stack your mini moments. That is. you can leverage that. You can grow from that. You can see how big of a life you've actually been living. And that's really what the unknown bucket list is it's your experience that you've lived, not so much a checklist. Because life happens in random, unexpected, and unplanned moments, but we grow from all of those. And when we shine the light on all of these things that we've accomplished, and when we identify all of the things that we have previously dismissed, people think that they're not spontaneous, but when life throws them a curveball, they have to be spontaneous. They have to react, they have to troubleshoot, they have to solve quickly. If you're a parent and you're trying to get out the door and a child throws up all over themselves and now all of a sudden they have to change their clothes, guess what? You're spontaneous because you are going to quickly unclothe that child, figure out what they're going to wear next, get them dressed, get them cleaned up, and still get out the door. And so there's like time management and spontaneity and all of these tiny little things that nobody looks at and gives themselves credit for. But when you shine the light on all of those things, and you're like, oh, I'm not this and I'm not that,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe you are, then you will grow and you'll just get bigger.
So, as you're sharing that, I'm going to share a story that just happened to me this weekend. And I still look back on it and I go, how did that happen? So, I do ballroom dancing and I was in a competition this past weekend. And about an hour and a half before I was supposed to go out on the floor, I came down with food poisoning and I got so sick. And there just so happened to be at the event a wellness group that did IVs. And so my instructor, he said, "Oh, Debbie, look, let's just get you some help. Let's see what happens." And I felt so sick. And we're waiting for this IV drip. And they're like, "How much longer to that drip? You have to be on the floor in like so many minutes." And I'm like, "I don't want to go on the floor. I just want to go to bed. I feel so sick." But they just kept saying, "Let's take it slow. Let's do one dance at a time. We'll go real easy. Just see what you can do." And I was resisting them. I was like, "I don't feel good." I was like, "Leave me alone." But they kept saying, "Let's try." And so we waited till the IV. I'm shivering under these blankets thinking, there's no way I'm going out there. But then there was something inside of me that said, just try one little dance and see what happens. So I come out from under the blankets and I walk out on the floor. And we started really slow. We just built up strength. And I kept telling my teacher, right now my brain is not as sharp as it needs to be. So like I kind of need your help along the way. And he was really great. Roman was really great. And we went through the competition and we got done. I can't believe it. I came in first place.
That's
I know. And I thought I
awesome.
had to share that story because that was one of those, like, I had to be in the moment. I had to count the cost. What was my body saying? What was the risk of going out there? Should I take the risk? Should I go? And it was just that little tiny window of let's start small and see what happens. If you can't do it, we'll stop. But if you can, we'll just keep trying. And I don't know why, I just had to share that story. We all screamed. When I took first place, it was like I never would have realized that joy had I not stepped into a place that was kind of messy and it wasn't exactly how it was supposed to look like. Everything about it was turned upside down. But I just thought I'll take the courage and the grace of God with me and go out on that floor and try. And so I hope that inspires somebody because, it sometimes life throws us a curveball and like, how are we going to do with it? Honestly, my first thought was, Just, I want to go back to my room. I just want to sleep the rest of the day, but they would not give up on me. And so, anyway, I just thought I would share that to hopefully inspire people because sometimes it's hard, but just try a small step.
It is. And that is a perfect example of undone bucket list because you never imagined that you were going to get food poisoning. And then
No.
you persevered through it. At some point, there must have been a tiny little whisper in the back of your brain. I heard you say that there was something that said, just try one.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the back, tiny little whisper, that's what you really wanted. You wanted to try, you wanted to go for it, and you did. And you talked, and you said you just did little steps one at a time. And so you stacked your little moments. And now you have this crazy story about how you won first place with food poisoning and you had to have IV drips.
I know. That's what I kept saying. We have a story now. We have a
Yeah.
story.
And that's really all life is it's stories,
Right, right.
and I talk about, so there's a lot of acronym. You talked about your acronym CAP. I have a lot of acronyms as well. And one of them is for brag. And because, nobody wants to be seen as a braggart,
Mm-hmm.
but we can share our stories and we can tell them in a way that inspires others to perhaps go and do something maybe that they haven't done or at least consider it. And my acronym for brag is because recognition accelerates growth.
Oh, I love that. Mm.
And it may not be our growth. I mean, we it might be because we might be sharing with somebody and somebody may be cheering us on and saying, "Oh yeah, well you should do this." And then you go to the next level or something and you learn about it because you shared your story with somebody who had a little bit of knowledge and they're like, "Oh, well you can go here and you can go here and you can continue to grow." It also might be the growth of someone else because you've shared your story.
Mm. That's true. I love it. Give me another acronym.
Well, one I do like is I have several. The word need. A lot of times we say, "Oh, I need to do this and I need to do that," and it's not necessary. And I'm not talking about I need to pay my bills.
Right.
That that's you have to pay your bills if you want to live your life. You do have to pay your bills.
That's
But
necessary.
if there's somebody that let's say there is a company picnic and it's like, oh, okay, well, we all need to go to this company picnic. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's just an example. But need, when it's not necessarily something that you want to do, and yet you're still saying, I need to do it. It's a necessary energy expense decision. So it's your energy. And that's where it comes in, like paying the bills. Is that necessary? Absolutely. So I'm going to spend some energy. That's my decision. I'm going to go pay my bills. Do I have to go to this company picnic? Again, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But when you consider what you want in this, how necessary is it that you actually do go? It's your energy, it's your time that you're going to expend if you go to this company picnic when you really don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But then maybe you make the compromise. You're like, okay, well, I don't want to go, but I also don't want to look bad. So my decision is I'm going to have a previous commitment. I'm going to show up and say that I have a previous commitment and that I have to leave in 1 hour. Nobody knows the previous commitment is to yourself.
Oh, that's good.
So you find a way, and that just further illustrates about how you find a way to negotiate with yourself about how to get what you want, even though there's constraints all around you and things that we maybe initially see as, well, there's no way I can't get out of it. I have to do it. I need to do it. well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. And maybe there's a way through it.
Sure, maybe you don't need to do the whole thing. So yeah, you're kind of giving yourself a little roadmap there and a permission to exit as well, from the picnic, like you have a commitment, but it is with yourself. So that's really good. So in closing, just can you share one more acronym with us? Because I think we learn a lot from acronyms.
I like the acronym SOON, especially since we were talking about, um, the later transitioning ages of life. Soon is kind of a heavy word. And it ties along with the story that I was just giving, is that if you want to do something or you don't want to do something, a lot of times we push people off, or things that we don't want to do, we push it off and we just say, yeah, I'll get to it soon. I'll get to it soon. Well, stop opting out now.
Mm.
Either do it or don't do it. Stop saying soon. And I don't like to tell people what to do. So I should take those words back. But if there's somebody that is uh, begging you to have lunch with them, and it's more of an acquaintance for you, but for them, you're more of like their best friend. And so it's an unequal relationship, but it will mean a lot to them. So you kind of want to see them happy. You don't want to let them down, but you also don't really want to do it either. If you stop opting out now, you set the date with them, they stop asking you when you're going to have lunch, they stop pressuring you when you're going to have lunch, they have the date in mind, you commit to doing the date, and it takes all of the stress, all unnecessary stress off of you. It takes unnecessary pressure off of you. Yes, you don't necessarily want to do it, but here's a decision where you have weighted the other person's feelings a little more heavier than what you want. You've made the date and you go and do it. If you do it sooner than later, then you're done. But when you stop saying, yeah, I'll get to it soon, I'll get to it soon, it's kind of like taking out the garbage. Yeah, I'll do it soon. Well, eventually the garbage is going to be overpiling and it's going to be stinky. And so, you know, do it or don't.
I could see where that can help you to stop building up resentment or frustration, to just stop opting out and just go do. Just go to lunch
Yeah.
and be kind. And
Yes. Or if you really have some feelings against it, let the person know that you can't. That's going to be difficult because you're going to hurt their feelings.
mhm.
Unfortunately, you might hurt when we all have the right to choose ourselves. And it does mean that sometimes you might disappoint somebody, you might hurt their feelings. But in the grand scheme of things, the moment, the, the tiny little moment that their feelings are hurt versus the amount of time that you have to spend, that's where you weigh what you want more.
And that is a hard one because you're
It
also
is.
talking about
And that's
someone
why it all
else's
takes practice.
their their emotions. Yeah, that is so hard. Well, Jay, I have so enjoyed everything that you've shared today. There's a lot to think about, that unknown bucket list, the things that we don't even know that are in our lives that we can begin to put in our bucket list and to live out. And so I love how you help people. So, in closing, what is it that you would still love to share with our audience that maybe they haven't heard yet?
Probably going back to how we were talking about what you want and what you don't want. I it's my opinion that where many of us get stuck is because we're trying to figure out what we want for the whole picture.
Hmm.
We have to have everything figured out before we make one step, before we make one move. We have to have it all planned. We have to have the right timing. We have to have the right money. Everything has to be figured out. But you can start to make tiny little changes, even if it's by doing what you don't want. And in these tiny little moments, you can begin to change your life from the inside out. You do not have to have the entire plan figured out in order to start changing your life. You don't have to have the perfect amount of money. You don't have to have the perfect amount of time. You just start from within, one decision at a time. The more you include yourself in your decisions, you will begin to show up in the world as a different person, and the world around you will begin to change.
That's so beautiful. And I can just sense that so many people would love to reach out to you. So, Jay, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
They can email me, which I know you'll have all the information included in your show notes. They can reach me at the Unknown Bucket List, which is my website, and they can also, if they want to get a jump start on their own unknown bucket list, just kind of flipping the switch on things maybe they've overlooked in their life, things that make them unique. Uh, they can go to resumeyourlife.com or resumeyourlife.com. It's a play on words because it's spelled exactly the same way. And I like to say you resume your life so you can resume your life, but on your terms.
I love that. And
So
you're
there's
connected with
that.
that as
It's
well.
just it's a free self assessment. There's no um, you don't sign on to my email list when you download it. It's, you know, it's just there for whoever wants to grab it. And then of course you can find me on the social medias.
Oh, that sounds like a great tool. Resume your life. I really like that. Yes, I'll have all of Jay's contact information in my show notes, and I highly recommend that you reach out to her because you may be thinking right now that, I do feel stuck. I don't know how to move forward, and I do want to create that unknown bucket list in my life and to start doing things that maybe I've thought about, but I've always been afraid to do, or maybe because you haven't considered yourself in the meantime. And so please connect with Jay. And to my transition tribe, thank you so much for coming in each and every week. And remember, your whole life is a story. Your whole life has a calling and a purpose. Whether you can see, know, or understand it, I am just speaking now to you that your life does have a purpose and there's more for you to discover about yourself because it's limitless. Your potential is completely untapped into. All of us, we tap into so much, and there's so much more for us to discover. So, as Jay said, it's never too late. So start today. Get in touch with Jay. Take that little assessment, see where you're at, and start beginning to dream again. Begin to believe again in what is possible for your life. And remember, transitions do have purpose and they do have power.